One of the most important skills that we as human beings can explore and develop is how to relate to mental objects, to mental technologies. A belief, a series of beliefs, are technologies. They're not true, they're not false. They're useful or not useful for a given context. If we believe that everyone's out to get us and we're surrounded by friends that are trying to help us out of a difficult problem, the belief isn't useful. It's not that it's not true, meaning depending on how one looks at things and defines out to get, there's always justification that says at least some people are out to get you some of the time, intentionally or otherwise. Or the world is a wonderful and friendly place out to help you. Is it useful when you're stood up with a gun in a dark alley and an addict is trying to get your money? Is it useful? So I want to offer a couple of guidelines for looking at mental architecture and mental technology. Now, the first thing to understand is that all technology, all thoughts are predicated on language. So we have, the thought up here, but it's standing on a base of language. If you don't have any language, you have no thought. It's impossible to think without language. So what we're in some ways doing is exploring a constructive relationship with language. Now, all language is a symbol. Language equals a symbol for an underlying reality. Language is not reality. It is a symbol that helps us relate to reality. Now, the symbol is dumber than the underlying reality. It's cruder. It's simpler than the underlying reality. Here's what I mean. What do we call this in language? We say this is a hand. Now, that's useful because it's dumb, because it's simple, because it's crude. This is not a hand. It's hundreds of billions of atoms and trillions of subatomic particles. This is not a hand. It's also not an isolated event. You could say this is a pattern of energy, but it is a pattern of energy that is in relationship with everything else. It's an ecology. Now, how do you know it's an ecology? Well, if you take this hand and cut it off from the body, it ceases to be a hand. I mean, how do you define a hand? Well, a hand is something that has 5 fingers. How do you define a finger? Well, they're pointy things that move, that do like this. Well, if you cut the hand, they don't move anymore. And a few days later, they rot. So it's not a hand. It's an energy pattern in relationship with every other energy pattern in existence. Meaning there's a link on multiple dimensions between this hand and every single thing that has existed, that exists, and that will exist. Now that's a pretty big statement, so let's look into it. Number 1, if the Big Bang didn't happen, Could this hand exist? No Big Bang, no hand. Now, you find a lot of things regress down to that factual or fictitious moment in the story or question. If a tree falls in the forest and nobody hears it, not even the animals, does it make a sound if nobody hears it? Well, does the Big Bang make a bang if nobody's there to hear it? So there's a lot of shaky projections of what we call reality that is based on this thing called language. And just as this hand is not a hand, it is trillions and trillions and trillions of energy patterns that are not static, that are information, and that are in relationship with any other thing. And if it stops being a hand when it is removed from the body, can you really call it a hand as a separate concept rather than a part of the body? Now, if we take it that far, can we say that a body exists separate from other bodies? Meaning, could this body exist without the two bodies of my parents? Could their bodies exist without the two bodies of their parents? Could this body exist if the monkey that first stood up on the African plains didn't exist? And what about the monkey before that? And could the monkey have existed before it crawled out of the ocean? Could the planet exist without the solar system, the galaxy, and the universe? Could this hand exist without the gravitational constant? You see, if something cannot exist without something, it is in a codependent relationship with that thing. In other words, if something is in a codependent relationship with something else, it's not really separate. If we say that in order to have warmth, we have to have the sun, then we can't say that the warmth is separate from the sun. And if in order to have life, we have to have warmth, we can't say that life is separate from the sun either. And in order to have this planet in this form, we have to have gravity. We can't say that we're separate from gravity. In other words, we cannot rationally say that we are separate from anything that would fundamentally change what we are if that thing didn't exist. It's an interdependent or a codependent relationship. Well, this hand is linked to everything. What about time? Could this hand exist if there wasn't any time? It's a pretty strong link. Time connects everything throughout the known universe. What about space? Could this hand exist if there was no space? It's a pretty big link. Space links every single object in existence. So we've already established a link between this hand and all time and all space, which in turn links it to every other thing in existence. And then there are spatial relationships, not just the space between, but all kinds of dynamics. What about the strong force, the weak force, the electromagnetic force? If electromagnetic energy didn't exist, could we exist? Well, now we're linked to the entire universe of electromagnetic energy. What about atoms? If atoms didn't exist, could we exist? Could this hand exist, right? So you can see how much of an illusion the word hand is. Because the average Westerner looks at a hand and thinks of it in the abstract, which isn't real. It's not real because the abstract way that a Westerner thinks of a hand is, you cut off the hand, put it in a test tube or something, sit in a lab, and then say that this is a hand and it's separate from the rest of the body and it's separate from what's going on Mars and it's separate from the past and the future. It has nothing to do with any of that. It is a hand. And that's a lie. It has everything to do with the Big Bang, the universe, evolution, the strong force, the weak force, the electromagnetic force, gravity. All time is affected by this hand. You realize if this hand doesn't exist, then the time continuum, the entire time continuum, is different. Oh, certainly, the further away you get from the hand, the less it is affected. But what if this hand was the hand that either does or doesn't get in a car accident with an inventor? There are so many repercussions that relate to what one part of the whole does. So language breaks things into pieces. You could see that language is the descent into the knowledge of good and evil, the awareness of polarity, by functioning as the knife that cuts the one into two, and then cuts the two into four, and then cuts the four into eight, and then cuts all the little bits up. These are all words. Now, these cuts are not real. They make absolutely no sense. Every single thing in existence connects to the Big Bang. The Big Bang is the ancestor. Everything in existence connects to time. Everything in existence connects to space. Every human is genetically linked to every other human and many other animals. Every species on this planet is inextricably linked to the planet. If the planet had never existed, then we do not exist. That's a link, and a very strong one. So what we're doing here is weakening the faith in the God of language, because the God of language is one of the primary Western gods. I think, therefore I am, Descartes. And there's a lot of paradox in this. I think, therefore I am, says Descartes, who started studying science after a visitation from an angel. An angel visits René Descartes in a vision and tells him to study science. He studies science, and out of science he starts developing Cartesian logic. But he could just as well say, I think this way because an angel told me to. Because that's what started one Frenchman's journey towards scientific reason. Go forth, said the angel to René Descartes, and examine the world through numbers and measurements. And that's what science is. You see, science doesn't exist without angel visitations. Angel visitations don't exist without science. Without language, which is one form of science, René Descartes could not have understood his vision. The angel spoke in language, And René Descartes had faith in a vision that doesn't show up in any test tube. So there's a link between science and mysticism and science. There's a link between all things. Now, the reason that I'm starting off by shaking a little bit of the belief in language, because we think of facts like this is a necklace. That's a fact. Well, this is something that people in the English language would mostly agree to term a necklace, because a necklace is defined as something that's wrapped around the neck, a lace around the neck that probably has some ornamentation, but that's not defined. A lace around the neck, a neck lace. Now this isn't lace. This is leather, but it's not leather. It's fake leather. It's not real leather, because real leather warps in hot tubs and bathtubs. This stuff doesn't. Now, it has an ornamentation. It's not a lace. It used to be a shoelace, probably. Though lace may have predated shoes. It could have been lace, and then bits of lace were used to tie shoes, which were called shoelaces, and bits of lace were used to tie something around the neck, which were called neck laces. So most of us would agree that this is a necklace. But the same logic or the same language that reveals this as a necklace, many people would say that this is a noun or a fact, and that this is not a tree. And we would also generally think and look at this as if it wasn't the past. We could say this was a necklace in 2021 when I'm making this video, but it's not a necklace in the 1850s. We would say that this necklace hadn't been made in the 1850s. And yet, elements that emerged today into this necklace were passing through the 1850s. Silversmithing, for example. If everyone in the 1850s gave up on silversmithing, then this necklace doesn't exist today. If everyone in the 1850s gave up on jewelry, the decoration of the body with jewels, this necklace doesn't exist. Because people stop mining jewels, if people stop wanting to buy jewels to ornament the body. So this necklace does not appear out of nowhere. It is inextricably linked throughout time. This necklace doesn't exist without the Big Bang. It doesn't exist without the invention of jewelry. It doesn't exist, the gems in this necklace are up to 200 million years old. These are quartz, and quartz has a 40 to 200 million year emergent period on the planet. So parts of this necklace do exist in the 1850s. And this necklace doesn't exist without shipping containers. Why? And it doesn't exist without capitalism. Right? Without capitalism, the god of efficiency is not worshipped to the extent that it is. Without the worship of the god of efficiency, you don't have the celebration of shipping containers, because shipping containers are celebrated as a 10x improvement in the transportation of goods. Having massive cranes on massive ships with shipping containers that are all the same size and can be stacked each weighing up to 200,000 pounds, with contents of all kinds, and can be imported and outported through the ports of the world. You don't get that without bowing down to the God of efficiency. And you don't get efficiency without the God of capitalism. Capitalism is the God of making money more efficiently. Capitalism is the prayer, the investment of energy. I put $1 to turn into $2. Now, agriculture is the prayer of life, of seeds, right? I put one seed to get many seeds. Capitalism is the prayer of capital. I put $1 to get more dollars. Well, this gives rise to international arbitrage. Because if I want $1 to get many dollars, it leads directly to shipping time-consuming work to parts on the planet that are willing to work for very little money, and then shipping the goods back to places where people charge a lot of money for their work and therefore have the money to buy the items. So you don't get this necklace without capitalism. Well, capitalism didn't start in the 1920s. It's an ecology. It's an emerging dynamic that has taken thousands of years. The first early forms of capitalism, trading seashells, right? 2021, it's Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a more efficient ledger of value than seashells or gold or greenbacks. And so we have the rise of Bitcoin as a new iteration of capitalism. All things are linked. There are no isolated objects, which means that all patterns of energy are in an interconnected ecology with all other patterns of energy. Words are heuristic, dumbed down boundaries. They're cuts. First, there is the one. And then there is the word. And then there is the consciousness, because all consciousness, all human consciousness comes from language, between good and evil, between 1 and 2, between this half and that half, up and down, right and left, male and female, good and bad. It's just language. It doesn't exist. None of them are real. You can say men are separate from women. They're not that separate. Take away all the women, how do men get born? Take away all the men, how do women conceive? They're not that separate when they are in an interdependent relationship. Whites are separate from black. They're not that separate. Go back 4 million years ago. They're all living in one community on one continent. They're all relatives with just a few genetic variations. They're not that separate. And you say this country is separate from that country. There are far more threads that connect. You think the air in country A is somehow different than the air in country B? Or that the gravitational constant is different in country A than country B? Or that water that floods in country A in a river that runs to country B doesn't affect country B? You think if your neighbor upstream pisses in their stream, the piss doesn't come down onto your land? These boundaries are absurd. But words are just that. They are the knives that create the illusion of particulate separation between a vast and interconnected ecology that is too complicated for the conscious mind to digest. So what is the use of language? It is an illusion in multiple ways. Number one, it creates artificial separation between things that are not actually separate. That's the first illusion. Number two, it creates a further separation when you have multiple languages. I say Jesus and you say Jesus. That's different. Why? Because you're using this word to reference what I'm referencing, and I'm using this word. So you have a second division with language. And you get a third element, which is that not everyone cuts up the world the same way. Some languages would describe the hand as the two things that have 5 points. You'd say, okay, those two. I get it. Okay, hands. Another language may call hands that which is at the end of the wrists. That way, if there's mutations and one person loses a finger, it's still there. It's still the hand. Okay, that's useful for locating that part of reality. Another language might focus on space more than object. They're both equal, by the way. You can define space, and in the cavities where space doesn't fill, you can reference, look over there where there isn't any space, and the isn't any space looks like this and like that. The absence of space, the void in space, looks like this. Well, as a masculine cult, we don't look at reality that way. We look at the object, the points, and we ignore the space. We don't say this is, look at the space that has that and the space that has that and that absence of space is a human. We ignore the space, which is much bigger than all of the objects in the universe. And that's probably why we ignore it, because it's too big to pay attention to with our limited brain capacity. So we focus on the much smaller area of all that is, which are the points, the objects, the particles, the dense parts of space, because it's all space. See, there's another trick of language. We say space and object. This is the object, this is the space. That's a lie. This is thin objects. You don't think there's molecules and atoms in every bit of this air? They're just not thick space. You don't think space is present in between, like a body is 98% water. An atom is 99% space. The universe is 99% space, a fractal echo. So it's all space. And it's all object. It's just, this is air molecules that we don't see because they're not very dense. And these are face molecules that we do see because they're calibrated to the eye. But each of these distinctions fall apart. You cannot have north without south. You cannot have black without white. You cannot have up without down. You cannot have inner without outer. All polarities depend on one another mathematically. Any distinction depends on its counterpart for the distinction to be registered. You realize that? You can't just have white and say not white. What's that? Well, it's black, right? You need the distinction in order to register something. So every distinction is connected to every other distinction. As it's not that and it's not that. But those that are the way language is creating this illusion of separation. So, first of all, language is not the object, and we often, in a Western world where we're lost in thought, meaning we're lost in language, in the sleep of language, we believe, we invest our consciousness in the symbol of reality, which is words. But the symbol isn't real. So language is a symbol of a reality and is not real. Language is a dumbed down symbol of reality that isn't real. Because we say that's a hand. No, it's not. If you drill down far enough, you've got more than 1 trillion equations. Now, if you say language is equation, this atom, then you realize the problem with language. Why is language always a lie? Well, you couldn't describe even 1/1,000,000th of the subatomic particle activity in one thing called a hand before it's all changed. The subatomic particles, each one of them is moving in relationship to other subatomic particles 1,000 times faster than one word can be spoken. So by the time something is spoken, it's out of date in a real sense. If we're looking at the subatomic level, by the time it is spoken, it is out of date. It's like by the time you receive this letter, I am now at a new address, was the phenomena with six-week overseas mail. Traveling salesperson sending postcards. By the time you receive this postcard, I'm in another city. It's out of date. By the time you say something, reality has changed, except when you deal with the very largest, crudest patterns. And they've changed too, just not enough that the words are still not relevant. So, the cuts are not real. The cuts are arbitrary. The emphasis is arbitrary. You can build a language that focuses on defining space, and the negative of space is an object, or you can focus a language on defining objects, and the negative of the object is space. Which is better? Well, for a limited brain, the object is better because space is far more challenging to communicate. But what if we were telepathic and we wanted a rapid lens and communication was instant and visual rather than linguistic? Well, then space could be a more accurate and useful thing. And if you had high RAM capacity, you could talk about space gradients. You could take millisecond snapshots of space and communicate to one another over large distances instantaneously the density of every object in the space. And that could be the most useful form of communication. This has 20% density, this has this amount of density, the light frequency is at this degree here at density. Okay, that could be a very useful snapshot of mathematical reality. That could be generated 1 trillion times faster than it would take for me to describe this poppy field behind me. So language is very arbitrary in its emphasis. We could talk in atoms, we could talk in mountains, we could talk in hundreds of feet, we could talk in millimeters of millimeters of millimeters. That's more referencing the human body. The human body is not affected by many things at the millimeter level, so we tend to talk in inches and feet because that's more in scale with us. To an ant or to a bee with a conscious mind, millimeters would probably be far more interesting because it's scale. So that we're referencing the body. Now, when we see just how weak language is, it's not real to begin with. It's a symbol. It's a dumbed down symbol that relates to our brain. It's completely arbitrary. It alienates as much as it connects because everyone that speaks another language now, you don't understand them. You say pie and they say gibwa. You have no idea what each other are talking about. That's when pointing is more useful than sounds. And then we make up these stories of interconnected patterns. We try and reassemble the ecological whole through language. We all do it differently. And we lack the brain capacity to integrate the data streams. Every human consciousness is similar to a camera. Now, if you are a security operator in a warehouse, you may have 20 cameras spread out about the warehouse at night. And you have then 20 regions of the screen, and your job is to glance at those regions. And if you see a burglar or whatever, those lenses are useful. Now, security operators do not have arguments with themselves or their camera, saying, wait a minute, that camera is showing me a picture of a stairway. But you over here, you're showing me a ceiling picture of a window and a ceiling. This camera is showing me light where there's a light on, and this one's more shadowy. Come on, guys, work it out, right? Figure out who's telling the truth. Is it light or is it dark? One or the other. And I'm going to smash the other camera, right? No, we're not that dumb when it comes to security cameras. But you take a wide perspective of human conscious minds. One of them living in Norway and says it's sunny out. I say, wait a minute, it's not sunny out. It's 8 in the evening. Someone in Brazil says it's 85 degrees. You look out the window. No, it's not. There's 3 feet of snow. It's Alaska. We're not that dumb, right? Because we figured out that there can actually be multiple different light systems, temperature systems, weather systems happening simultaneously. So we're not that dumb. But when somebody says that discipline is the number one focus in life and somebody else says play is the most important thing in life, we think this is worth arguing about. Is it this, that there's one right way? Oh, we haven't figured that out. So that's a misuse of language, trying to get everyone to see our particular perspective. We look out of our eyes at our thing and, yeah, it's snowing out there. We look out of our eyes and it's 85 degrees and we're getting sunburned. I'm freezing to death. I'm sunburned. Get out of the heat. Get to the heat, right? We're complex enough to understand that with weather. We're not currently psychologically literate enough to understand that with psychology. You need to be more positive. You need to be more cynical. We think there's one right answer. You know, the person handing their $10,000 traveler's checks to a fakir who says they desperately need the money and are going to turn it into $1 million could probably use a little cynicism. The person who's sitting in $1 billion lifestyle, feeling depressed and what's the point, could probably use a little bit of positivity. So it's not black and white. Things are contextual. But simple minds, ours, like to have things be absolute. We think that truth is absolute. And our truth may be absolute. but we try to project it out there. If I think that heat is good because my hands are frostbitten, then everyone should think that heat is good, including people who are in deserts in need of water, who naturally think that heat is bad in that context. We all live in different psychological realities. And the psychological realities we live in create continuums, with all the different things that we are connected with and that are around us. And so words are used to create heuristic models of reality. Now, reality is spherical. You look at the universe, you look at time, you look at revolutions of the planet, you look at atoms. Reality is spherical and cyclical. You look at the breath, you look at time, you look at space. It's cyclical. A revolution, whether in transportation, a train is moving from track, a revolution, progress, forward, is the wheel going all the way around, then going all the way around again, then going all the way around again. A breath is a circle. A life and a death is a circle. Reality is cyclical, and it's complex. We can't deal with complexity, and so we use language to create systems. A system is a model that has something to do with reality, and that takes us through a revolution of reality. So if we take this system here, we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a 5-point system. Is it a sphere? No. But if you follow the 5-point system, you'll crudely grow through the sphere. There'll be some bangs at these corners, some tension points, and you'll also find yourself diverging and in conflict from other people who have different systems, because this person is using a triangular system, a 3-point system. And they meet up here. You all agree on this point, but they land over here and they land on here, and you don't touch those points in the circle. It's not your thing. It's not your system. So everyone has a system, and that system has a certain amount of complexity and references a certain number of points on the sphere. Capitalism obviously references the point of capital. But what you can see is that systems will be in conflict with one another, even though the underlying reality is never in conflict with anything and is interconnected with all things. The system will be in conflict, like this triangular and this square system. They will agree over here, and then they will diverge here. The person on the triangular system will be alone, while their friend on the square system will be going over here and also alone. They will diverge here, but then they meet up here from time to time, and then they diverge and meet up here. So the square and the triangle in this system is not too difficult. But what if the triangle is this way? And they never meet up. They have conflict at these cross points. They just never meet up. This one works for me. I get around the sphere this way. You get around the sphere this way. Now, this is what I'm leading up to. All thought, all language is a system for carving up the reality in a fictitious way and then putting it back together there in a creative way. You've created it through the fiction of language. And we have, unfortunately, this idea, is it true? Is it true? I want the true way. Is it right? I want the right way. I want the true way. Well, if you think of life and existence being good, then the right way is what moves you towards life, towards sustainable existence. The right way for you, if your hands are frostbitten, is to get towards the heat. The right way for someone else who is sunburned is to get away from the heat. So there is a sense of right and wrong, but it is personal. I mean, there are parts of it that are collective. If you destroy your host body as an organism, as a life form, it is wrong if you want your species to exist. Cutting down the trees, polluting your own air is wrong to the extent that you believe in life. Everyone can agree on that. We'll feel it. I mean, just put everyone in a room, just to simulate it. Put everyone in a room and give everyone a button, and the more they push the button, the more smoke and toxins will come in the room for everyone. And after enough choking, everyone is going to fall on the person who's still pressing the button and saying, "You motherfucker, cut out polluting our room. We're all having a hard time breathing. So-and-so's already having an asthma attack. Cut it out. This is wrong." In what context? Well, we want to live. So everyone would come to that convergence in a room where you just give everyone a button that pours smoke and toxins into the room and see what they think is the right thing to do. Well, every factory in every country is pouring out toxins, and everyone that cuts down trees is removing portions of the lungs that remove those toxins. So a double whammy. We're going to attack the lungs and spew more toxins simultaneously and see what happens. That's wrong from a perspective of sustained human life. Up to a point, meaning it's all, it's also generative and creative, so there's a tension between these things. Now, to someone who is a subsistence farmer trying to make charcoal so that they can get some money to send their child to school. See, you're putting toxins in the air, but there could be some rightness in that. It's like, I want my child to have an education. Okay. What's it going to take? Money. Okay. How are you going to get it? Well, I've got these trees on my land. The building market, nobody wants to buy these types of trees for wood, but they want charcoal. Okay, well, then we're going to cut the tree down and make some charcoal. Oh, okay, well, that's what we're going to do. There's something right about it, and there's something wrong about it. Right? And so these issues are often very personal. This helped my depression, but it wasn't good for my lungs. It got me through the day, but now I'm dealing with liver poisoning. There's a mixture of pros and cons. So how do we evaluate a truth? So first of all, we understand that reality is the circle, and that words cut up the circle in a variety of patterns, and that depending on where we are in relationship with ourself and with various parts in the circle, our well-being will be facilitated by moving in a couple of different directions. one person's well-being may be facilitated by moving north, one by moving south, one by getting hotter, one by getting colder, one by being more cynical, one by being more positive, one by having more boundaries, one by merging boundaries, right? So within the systems, and we're all dealing with a system because we're all using language to navigate reality, we have the point of grace. The point of grace in any circle is the center, the eye of the storm. A wheel could be turning at 3,000 miles per hour, but the very center of the wheel is not vibrating at all. It's still, the still point at the center, right? So we can move towards grace at the center, but we can move towards waking up, sensation, stimulation, by moving out towards the periphery. Maybe a Buddhist monk is tired of being isolated and wants to get on a subway bus and go shopping and get a job and wake up in that reality, to move out of the center. Maybe a stockbroker is burned out and wants a 10-day meditation retreat. So we're moving, as we move towards the center, we move towards stillness, towards grace, towards balance, towards ease. As we move out to the extremes, we move into pain, violation, unbalance, and effort. So that's our movement. And we're all starting at different points. Someone who starts with extreme poverty may find their center moving towards extreme wealth. But at a certain point in that movement, the medicinal direction becomes toxic. You have a little bit of belladonna, and it helps your heart for certain people. You take a lot of belladonna, it kills you, right? So there's a movement through the center, and often we're not attuned enough, we're not paying enough attention to the center, so that as we move through, we feel, oh, this is good. And we like simple thoughts, particularly in the West, because we have a dualistic paradigm. We like simple thoughts, such as, we start out over here and we say, ooh, moving to the right is good, because it feels good. And we keep moving to the right, it feels good. And we develop a dogma, an extreme. We say moving to the right is good, moving to the left is bad. Based on our experience, it's true. We get to the center, we start passing till we get over to this other extreme. And then we say, no, moving to the right is bad. Where did I get offline? I thought moving to the right was good, but I was wrong. No. Moving to the right was good up until you got to the center, and then you went further into the extreme and more suffering, right? That's the problem with either or paradigms. So if words aren't real, and if all things are interconnected, and if truth is contextual and in many cases subjective, how do we work with thoughts and paradigms and beliefs? So a couple of guidelines. Number one, is it leading to sustainable well-being for you and what you love? If it is, use it. Number two, all systems are faulty. They're all flawed. I could take this circle and develop it into a system. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is a 7-point system. Now, it's getting me around the circle, but it's also more bumpy than the actual circle. If I go through my 7-point system, it's getting me there, just rather bumpy. And yet, if I did 100 points through the system, I might not remember it. So a bumpier, cruder system that I remember is better than a more elegant system that is too big for me to grasp, it overwhelms me. So you want to move towards complexity without getting overwhelmed. So is it simple enough for me to relate to, but complex enough to not be unnecessarily bumpy is another guide. If so, use it. The other thing is don't get attached to the system. Get attached to well-being and using the system as if it is clothes. Language is a system. Truth is a system. Beliefs are a system of beliefs. Every system generates a probability field. If the probability field is a sustained improvement of your well-being relative to the status quo that you've experienced, use it until you find a better one. Ultimately, language itself is too flawed to transcend the limits of the constructs of language. And so you transcend language. It's called the transcendent brain, the DMT flash, the death of the body, and transcendent consciousness. But as long as you're in a body, work within some system. A good system will take you around the circle, have a constructive relationship with each point of the circle. So to go around the circle, you have to go to the north and the south. You have to go up and you have to go down. A good system will do something useful with the entire journey. A polarizing system, a wasteful system, will put you at war with yourself and at war with much of reality. For example, if your system is to hold on to the known and fight the unknown, your system involves doing battle with 99.9% of the larger ecology that you're a part of, which is a battle you will always lose. So, but if you're being overwhelmed with so much stimulation that you can't process it, regulating yourself into an environment where you can digest the amount of newness that you're experiencing at any given point is a good movement for you. So beliefs are like clothing. They're not real. They have consequences. Like if you believe that writing is good, then you have to also believe that not writing is bad in the paradigm of good and bad. Now, if you have the belief that writing generates verbal consciousness, you have a little bit more freedom. You don't create bad people, all the people who don't write. You create people with more or less verbal consciousness. And if you have a both-and paradigm, well, then there's room for other people as well. Words are like clothing. They contain and reference parts of the reality. They are not that reality. Words divide and cut things into pieces in ways that do not exist, but may still be useful in bringing awareness to parts of reality that otherwise you are unconscious of. The most useful part of language is that it develops nuance awareness of the illusionary particles that are revealed through language. Language is a technology for revealing reality. When we do that in a way that creates sustainable well-being for ourselves and others, we could say that that's a useful use of language. When we use it to alienate ourselves from reality by believing in the illusionary cuts to such an extent that we feel completely separate while being innately connected to all things, then language is harming, is weakening the sense of self by creating its illusionary separateness. Enjoy. Hi, I'm Dane Rose. All knowledge begins with a paradigm, and out of that paradigm comes an idea, an awareness that we adopt, reject, or synthesize into something better. It doesn't become wisdom, it doesn't become useful until we take action, until we integrate it into not only our thoughts, but our feelings, our body, our words, and our way of being. For that to occur, we have to move from the passive media paradigm into more active engagement. In the link below, in the More Information section, is an invitation to join a very small, deliberately filtered, high-quality discussion with a group of people who share a common language and want to work with these ideas, with me and with one another, with the sole goal of creating 10 times more sustainable well-being for ourselves and those around us per unit of energy invested. Thank you for watching.